Everyone gather around. My stepmother's voice carried across the marble foyer of the Sullivan Mansion. Time for the annual family photo. I watched from my corner as they assembled. My father in his perfectly tailored suit, my stepmother Victoria directing everyone into position, my stepbrothers Marcus and Andrew preening in their matching blazers. The photographer adjusted his lights, preparing to capture another perfect moment in the Sullivan family's carefully curated history. Sophia. Victoria's eyes landed on me with familiar disdain. Be a dear and adjust the curtains. The light's all wrong. At 28, I was still being treated like the help instead of family. But I didn't argue. I simply nodded and moved to the windows, knowing I wouldn't be invited into the frame. I hadn't been part of a family photo since I was 8 years old. Since Victoria had married my father and decided the daughter from his first marriage didn't fit her vision of the perfect family. Perfect, the photographer exclaimed. The Sullivans really are America's perfect business dynasty. If only they knew. Behind my quiet exterior, I smiled slightly. They had no idea that the security cameras recording this moment, like every moment in the Sullivan Mansion, belonged to my company. No idea that their perfect facade was being archived on my servers, every secret and lie cataloged and time-stamped. 20 years of exclusion had taught me something valuable. The best place to observe is from the shadows. It started the day Victoria moved in. I was 8, still grieving my mother's death, when this former beauty queen swept into our lives with her 2 sons and her plans for the perfect blended family. Plans that, it quickly became clear, didn't include me. First came the accidental exclusions from family events. Then the separate dining arrangements. I wasn't ready for formal family dinners. By the time I was 12, I was essentially living in the guest wing, attended by staff, but otherwise forgotten. My father, consumed by running Sullivan Enterprises, didn't notice or didn't care. He was too busy grooming Marcus and Andrew to take over the company, too enchanted by Victoria's social connections to see what was happening to his own daughter. But being invisible had advantages. No one noticed when I started spending time with George, the head of mansion security. He taught me about camera systems, access controls, the invisible web of technology that protected the wealthy. No one cared when I chose to study cybersecurity in college instead of business like my stepbrothers. At least she's learning a trade. Victoria had sniffed when I announced my major. Someone has to manage the help. I graduated summa cum laude. No one from my family attended the ceremony. That same year, I founded Sentinel Security Solutions, though not under my own name. The company documents listed Sarah Chen as the founder and CEO. My college roommate had been happy to play the role of public face, understanding what I was building. Because while Victoria was busy planning galas, and Marcus and Andrew were playing at being executives, I was creating something powerful. Starting with small contracts, building a reputation for excellence and discretion, Sentinel Security grew rapidly. The wealthy love their privacy, and they'll pay handsomely to protect it. Within 5 years, Sentinel was providing security for half of New York's elite, including, through a series of shell companies and subsidiaries, the Sullivan family. Victoria herself had insisted on upgrading the mansion's security after a series of high-profile home invasions in their social circle. She never looked closely at the company's ownership, never questioned why their bid was slightly lower than competitors. And so I watched. Every meeting, every private conversation, every backroom deal, all captured and stored on my secure servers. I saw Marcus embezzling from the company accounts, Andrew's drug habits and gambling debts, Victoria's secret meetings with business rivals. Most importantly, I saw my father's transformation from respected businessman to willing participant in corporate fraud. The perfect family's perfect facade was built on lies, corruption, and stolen money, and I had proof of all of it. Safia. Victoria's sharp voice pulled me from my thoughts. Stop dawdling with those curtains. We have guests coming for the foundation dinner. The foundation, Victoria's pride and joy, the Sullivan Family Charitable Foundation. On paper, it supported children's education. In reality, it was a sophisticated money laundering operation. The security cameras had captured plenty of evidence of that too. Yes, Victoria, I said quietly, adjusting the curtains one final time. As the photographer packed up his equipment, my phone buzzed with an alert from Sentinel's monitoring system. Another suspicious transfer from the foundation's accounts. $3 million moved through a series of shell companies before disappearing into an offshore account. I added it to my growing file of evidence. The question wasn't if I would expose them, but when. That evening's foundation dinner was exactly what you'd expect. Wealthy donors writing checks, Victoria making tearful speeches about helping underprivileged children, Marcus and Andrew working the room like the corporate princes they pretended to be. I stood in my usual corner, watching the security feeds on my tablet. Every camera angle perfect, every conversation recorded in crystal clear audio. Quite an operation you're running. I turned to find James Carter beside me, the FBI's lead investigator for financial crimes, though no one at the party knew that. He was here undercover, investigating rumors of corporate fraud at Sullivan Enterprises. I don't run anything, I said carefully. I just manage the security systems. He smiled slightly. Ms. Chen, you mean? Or should I say Ms. Sullivan? My heart stopped. I don't know what you're talking about. Relax. He sipped his champagne. Your secret's safe. We've been watching Sentinel Security for months. Very impressive work. Almost as impressive as the evidence you've been collecting. I studied him carefully. What do you want? Partnership. We're building a case, but your surveillance records would make it airtight. Together, we cooled. Safia. Victoria's voice cut through the crowd. Stop chatting and check the cameras in the East Wing. I thought I saw a light flickering. I gave James a bland smile. Duty calls. Excuse me. As I walked away, my mind was racing. The FBI was watching. The perfect family's perfect crime was about to unravel, and I had a decision to make. That night, after the guests had gone and the mansion was quiet, I sat in my private office, hidden away in the guest wing where no one ever visited. On my screens, the security feeds showed different scenes. Marcus in his study, shredding documents. Andrew making frantic phone calls to his bookie. Victoria in the garden, having a heated argument with someone on her phone. And my father. My father sat alone in his office, staring at an old photograph. I zoomed in the camera. It was a picture of him and my mother, holding a baby. Me. Before Victoria, before the perfect facade, before everything went wrong. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Could I really destroy them all? Then I remembered 20 years of exclusion, 20 years of being treated like a ghost in my own home, 20 years of watching them steal and lie and corrupt everything they touched. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to James Carter. The subject line was simple: evidence attached. The perfect family was about to learn that the person they tried to erase had been watching all along. And I had seen everything. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in watching people unravel. I monitored it all through my security feeds. watching each family member react to the first tremors of their world collapsing. It started with a phone call to Marcus from the company's chief financial officer. The SEC is asking questions. The CFO's voice crackled through my perfectly placed microphones. They're auditing all foundation transactions from the past 5 years. Marcus paced his office, running hands through his perfectly styled hair. Stall them. Use the usual procedures. They've frozen the offshore accounts. All of them. I watched the color drain from my stepbrother's face as he realized their usual escape routes were closed. In another feed, I saw Andrew receiving similar news from his private banker. All his secret accounts, the ones he used for gambling debts and drug payments, were suddenly inaccessible. Victoria took longer to notice something was wrong. She was too busy planning the foundation's next gala, ordering staff around with her usual imperial manner, until her personal assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Mrs. Sullivan, the New York Times is on the line. They're asking for comment about allegations of money laundering through the foundation." I zoomed in on Victoria's face just in time to catch her perfect mask crack. For a split second, real fear showed through. My father was the last to know. I watched through the camera in his office as Marcus burst in, waving his phone. "Dad, we have a problem. Someone's talking to the feds. Someone who knows everything." For the first time in years, I saw my father look old, tired. "What do you mean? Everything?" "The foundation, the offshore accounts, the fake contracts, all of it. They have documentation, video recordings, audio files." My father's eyes narrowed. "Video recordings?" "From our own security systems." Marcus was practically shouting now. "Every meeting, every conversation, it's all been recorded." I smiled, watching my father's face as realization dawned. He looked straight at the camera in his office, the one he'd never paid attention to before. For a moment, I thought I saw recognition in his eyes. Then Victoria swept in, already in damage control mode. I called the lawyers, all of them, and the PR team. "We need to present a united front." She looked around the office. "Where's Sophia?" My father frowned. "What does Sophia have to do with this?" "She manages the security systems." Victoria snapped. "If someone's been accessing our cameras." "You mean the cameras you insisted we upgrade?" My father's voice was quiet. "The contract you pushed through without review." Victoria's perfect composure slipped again. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing." He turned to stare out the window. "Nothing at all." I switched feeds to the mansion's entrance just in time to see 3 black SUVs pull up. FBI agents emerged, led by James Carter. "Right on schedule," I murmured. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Chen, my public face at Sentinel Security. "They're moving on all locations simultaneously. 15 federal warrants being executed right now." I sent back a thumbs up, then switched my attention to the main foyer camera. Victoria was trying to prevent the agents from entering, waving papers from her lawyers. "This is harassment. We're upstanding members of the community." "Mrs. Sullivan." James Carter's voice was polite but firm. "We have warrants for the arrest of Marcus and Andrew Sullivan on charges of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. We also have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and security recordings from the premises." "Security recordings?" Victoria's voice rose an octave. "But those belong to Sentinel Security. You can't." "Actually," Carter smiled slightly, "we have full cooperation from Sentinel's CEO, Ms. Chen. Or should I say?" He looked directly into the nearest camera. Miss Sullivan? The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Victoria's face as she processed what he'd said, as she finally understood who had been watching all along. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible. She's nothing. She's no one. She," my father said quietly, "is my daughter, the one you told me to forget." I switched feeds again, watching as agents led Marcus and Andrew out in handcuffs. My stepbrothers were shouting about lawyers, about family loyalty, about how this must be some mistake. But my attention was on my father. He stood in his office, staring at that old photograph again. Then he did something that surprised me. He walked to the camera and spoke directly into it. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I should have seen what was happening. Should have protected you." He paused, then added softly, "Your mother would be ashamed of what I've become." For the first time since I started this, I felt tears in my eyes. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. They found the Foundation's real books. Victoria's being arrested too. I watched through the cameras as they led my stepmother out. Her perfect hair was mussed, her designer outfit wrinkled. She was crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "This is your fault," she screamed at my father. "You and your precious first wife's daughter. We gave you everything, the perfect family, the perfect image. Perfect." My father's laugh was bitter. "We destroyed the only perfect thing I had, and now we're paying for it." I switched off the feed, letting my screens go dark. 20 years of watching, waiting, and recording had led to this moment. The perfect family's crimes were exposed. Their empire was crumbling. But as I sat in my hidden office, listening to the chaos below, I realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning, because I had one more card to play, one final revelation that would change everything. And this time, I wouldn't be watching from the shadows. This time, I would step into the light. The Sullivan mansion felt different without the perfect family. Empty rooms echoed with memories, security cameras watching silently as federal agents boxed up evidence of 2 decades of fraud. I sat in my father's office, now my office, reviewing the final piece of evidence I hadn't turned over to the FBI. A video from 15 years ago, captured by the old security system, the one Victoria had insisted on replacing with my company's equipment. On the screen, my father and Victoria stood in this very room, arguing about me. "She's becoming a problem," Victoria said, pacing in agitation. "She's too smart, asks too many questions. She'll figure out what we're doing with the Foundation." My father looked tired, already beaten down. "She's my daughter, Victoria, my only link to Catherine. Your dead wife isn't here anymore." Victoria snapped. "I am. And I'm telling you, either the girl goes to boarding school or our arrangement ends. Choose." I watched my father's face as he made the choice that would shape all our lives. "I'll make the arrangements." 2 weeks later, I was shipped off to a boarding school in Switzerland. The perfect solution. Far enough away that I couldn't interfere with their schemes, but expensive enough to maintain the family's charitable image. What they hadn't counted on was that my exile would give me exactly what I needed: distance, perspective, and time to plan. My phone buzzed. James Carter calling. "The DA is offering deals," he said without preamble. "Marcus and Andrew are ready to flip on Victoria. They're claiming she masterminded everything." I smiled. "And the evidence I sent this morning?" Game changer. Victoria's lawyers are already reaching out for plea negotiations. The evidence in question was devastating. Videos of Victoria meeting with known money launderers, Audio recordings of her threatening employees who asked questions. Paper trails showing her systematic looting of the foundation. "What about my father?" I asked quietly. Carter sighed. "He's cooperating fully. His lawyer thinks with his age and health, he might avoid jail time. But the company will need new leadership," I finished. Because that was my final card, the one I'd been holding back until now. While Victoria had been busy destroying the family's legitimate business, I had been quietly buying shares through various shell companies. Combined with my father's shares, which would be forfeited under the plea agreement, I now controlled 51% of Sullivan Enterprises. The prodigal daughter wasn't just back. She owned everything. A knock at the office door made me look up. My father stood there, looking older than his 65 years. "The FBI said I'd find you here," he said softly. I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat down heavily, his eyes moving to the security camera in the corner. "All these years," he murmured, "you were watching, building your own empire while we destroyed ours." "Not destroying," I corrected, "transforming. Sullivan Enterprises can be legitimate again, ethical." He studied my face, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in 20 years. "You look so much like your mother. She would have been proud." "Would she?" I turned my laptop so he could see the old video still playing. "Proud that you chose Victoria's schemes over your own daughter." He flinched. I was weak, afraid of losing everything if Victoria exposed my early frauds to the board. But in trying to protect our wealth, I lost something far more valuable. Your soul, my daughter. Silence filled the room. Through the windows, I could see federal agents leading the last of Victoria's conspirators out of the mansion. I reviewed the plea agreement. I said finally, "You'll avoid prison by forfeiting your shares and testifying against Victoria. The company will need a new CEO." He nodded wearily. "Marcus and Andrew are going to prison. Victoria will follow. It's over." "No," I said quietly. "It's just beginning." I handed him a folder. My plans for restructuring Sullivan Enterprises. Clean energy investments, technological innovation, legitimate charitable work. Everything the company could have been without Victoria's corruption. "You're taking over," he said. It wasn't a question. "I own controlling interest now. The board votes tomorrow, but it's a formality. The real question is, will you help me?" He looked surprised. "You want my help? After everything?" "Not as CEO, not even as an executive, but as my father." I met his eyes. "If you're ready to be that again." For the first time in 20 years, I saw tears in his eyes. "I don't deserve a second chance." "No," I agreed, "but I deserve a father. And this company deserves a chance to be something better than what Victoria made it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Victoria, facing overwhelming evidence, accepted a plea deal, 20 years in federal prison. Marcus and Andrew got lighter sentences in exchange for their cooperation, but they would still spend years behind bars. The board voted unanimously to accept my leadership, especially after I presented evidence that Sentinel Securities' profits could help offset the losses from the foundation's collapse. My father, true to his word, took a humble role as an advisor. Each morning, he would arrive early to help me review contracts and strategic plans. Each evening, we would have dinner together, just the two of us, rebuilding 2 decades of lost time. 1 month after taking control, I stood in the mansion's foyer, watching a different kind of photo shoot. This one was for Forbes magazine, a cover story about the transformation of Sullivan Enterprises. Ms. Sullivan, The photographer called. "Would you like your father in this shot?" I looked at the man who had once chosen wealth and power over his own daughter. He stood uncertainly to the side, just as I had done so many times before. "Yes," I said, "I would." As we posed together, I caught our reflection in the window. Behind us, the security camera watched silently, no longer a tool for exposing crimes, but a reminder of how I had turned my exile into strength. The perfect family was gone. In its place was something real, imperfect, complicated, but honest. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from James Carter. Victoria's appeals were denied. It's really over. I smiled, looking at my father as he proudly straightened his tie for the photo. "No," I whispered, "it's just beginning." Because sometimes the person they try to erase becomes the person who writes the ending. And in this ending, the forgotten daughter didn't just survive, she triumphed. The security cameras had seen everything, but more importantly, they had shown me who I really was. Not a victim, not an outcast, but a woman strong enough to turn 20 years of exclusion into an empire of her own. And this time, I wasn't just in the family photo. I was the one taking it. The invitation to the annual Sullivan family reunion sat on my desk, its gold-embossed lettering catching the morning light streaming through my penthouse windows. 15 years of carefully maintained deception were about to end, and oddly enough, it wasn't even my choice. I picked up my phone and reread the email that had triggered everything. Forbes 30 under 40, the new face of digital art. Sophia Sullivan's NFT empire reaches $3.8 billion valuation. The article would be published tomorrow, just 2 days before the family reunion. My carefully constructed facade was about to shatter, and there was nothing I could do about it. "Miss Sullivan?" My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your brother Marcus is on line 1. Again." Of course he was. He'd been calling nonstop since the press release went out to major publications. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Hello, Marcus." "What the hell, Sophia?" He didn't bother with pleasantries. "I just got a call from Business Insider asking for a comment about my billionaire sister. Want to explain that?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "I guess you'll have to wait for the article like everyone else." "Cut the crap," he snapped. "All these years, you've been letting us think you were barely getting by. Mom and Dad have been worried sick about you." I couldn't help but laugh. "Worried? Is that what you call it?" The constant lectures about getting a real job. The snide comments about how I'm wasting my potential. They were trying to help. No, they were trying to control me. Just like they tried to control you, and you let them. Silence fell on the other end of the line. Marcus had always been the good child, following our parents' carefully planned path. Business school, MBA, joining our father's investment firm. The golden son who never strayed from the script. Just tell me one thing," he finally said. "How long? How long have you been hiding this?" I stood up and walked to the window, watching a private helicopter land on a nearby building's helipad. My helicopter, actually. One of 3 I owned. Remember when I moved to that tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn? When you first started with your digital art nonsense. That was, he paused, calculating. 15 years ago. That's right. Everyone thought I was crazy, throwing away my finance degree to doodle on computers, as Dad called it. But what none of you knew was that I'd already sold my first NFT collection for $50,000. 50,000? Back then? And 6 months later, I sold another for $200,000. By the time Dad was telling everyone at Christmas dinner that I was going through a phase, I had my first million. I could almost hear him doing the math in his head. But you still borrowed money from Mom and Dad for rent. You drove that beat-up Honda until last year. I never borrowed money from them, Marcus. I asked them to invest in my company. They refused, loudly and repeatedly. The Honda was a choice, not a necessity. Just like this penthouse was a choice. And the private jet, and everything else I kept hidden from all of you. Private jet. His voice cracked. Jesus, Sophia. How rich are you exactly? I smiled, remembering all the family dinners where they treated me like the poor relative. The way our younger sister Olivia would ostentatiously pick up the check, making sure everyone knew she was helping out her struggling artist sister. The Forbes article will say $3.8 billion, but that's a conservative estimate. The real number is closer to 5. The sound Marcus made was somewhere between a gasp and a choke. Now, if you'll excuse me, I continued. I have a board meeting to attend. Oh, and Marcus? I'll see you at the family reunion. I'm thinking of making quite an entrance. I hung up before he could respond and pressed the intercom. Sarah, is everything set for the reunion? Yes, Miss Sullivan. The jet is fueled and ready. The car service is arranged for all family members to be picked up in Rolls-Royces. The venue has been updated to the private island as requested, and the NDAs have been prepared for all staff. Perfect. I picked up the reunion invitation again. For 15 years, I'd played the role they expected, the artistic black sheep who couldn't handle the real world, the daughter who needed constant reminders about financial responsibility, the sister who was pitied and patronized at every family gathering. But not this time. My phone buzzed with a text from my youngest sister Olivia. OMG Soph, please tell me this Forbes thing is a joke. What's going on? I left it unanswered. Olivia, who never failed to mention her 6-figure salary at every family gathering. Olivia, who loved to reminisce about how she'd made it, while her big sister was still finding herself. The intercom buzzed again. Miss Sullivan, your parents are both on the line. Tell them I'm in a meeting. I checked my watch. And Sarah, call the helipad. I think I'll take the chopper to the board meeting today. As I gathered my things, my mind wandered back to the day that started it all. The day I decided to hide my success from my family. 15 years earlier. Digital art isn't real art, Sophia. My father's voice boomed across the dinner table. And this NFT nonsense? It's a fad, a scam. No one's going to pay real money for pictures on a computer. I sat there, 22 years old, fresh out of college, trying to explain my vision to my family. The same family that had paid for an Ivy League finance degree they expected me to use at my father's firm. Actually, Dad, I just sold my first collection for. Enough. He cut me off. I don't want to hear about your little hobby. Either you come work for the firm like we planned, or you're on your own. No more support, no more safety net. My mother reached across the table, patting my hand condescendingly. Sweetie, we just want what's best for you. You need stability, a real career. I looked around the table at their faces, my father's disappointment, my mother's concerned frown, Marcus's smug smile, Olivia's barely concealed disdain. That was the moment I made my decision. I wouldn't tell them about the $50,000 sale, or the 3 galleries that wanted to represent me, or the tech companies reaching out about collaborations. You're right, I said, standing up. I need to figure this out on my own. 2 weeks later, I moved into the smallest, cheapest studio apartment I could find in Brooklyn. My family assumed I was struggling, living on my savings, too proud to admit defeat. In reality, I was building an empire. The first year was intense. I worked 18-hour days, developing my artistic style, learning about blockchain technology, building connections in the crypto art world. My first major collection, Digital Dreams in Binary, sold out in hours, bringing in $1.2 million. I took that money and invested it back into the business, hiring developers, creating new platforms for artists, innovating in ways the traditional art world couldn't imagine. But every time I visited home, I drove my old Honda, wore simple clothes, lived the part of the struggling artist. "At least let me help with your rent," my mother would offer, while my father shook his head in disappointment. "No thanks, Mom. I'm doing fine." And I was more than fine. By the end of that first year, my net worth had hit $10 million. By year 3, $100 million. But to my family, I was still just Sophia, the dreamer who couldn't face reality. Now, 15 years later, as I stepped into my private helicopter, I thought about how it had all spiraled into something bigger than I'd intended. The little deception had become a massive secret, and in 2 days, everything would change. My phone buzzed again, a message from my father. "We need to talk." Now, I smiled and turned off the phone. They'd have to wait for the reunion. After 15 years of hearing about my failures, they were about to learn about my success. And I was going to make sure it was a revelation they'd never forget. The Forbes article dropped at exactly 6:00 a.m. Eastern Time. I was already awake, sipping coffee in my home office, watching the chaos unfold on my multiple screens. Digital Art Revolutionary: How Sophia Sullivan Built a Multi-Billion-Dollar Empire in Secret. The headline was accompanied by a photo I'd specifically chosen for this moment. Me standing in front of my most successful NFT collection, wearing clothes that cost more than my sister Olivia's monthly salary. The article didn't just reveal my wealth. It detailed every success I'd hidden for 15 years. My phone exploded with notifications. First came the family group chat. "Olivia, is this for real? $3.8 billion? Marcus, I tried to warn you all yesterday. Mom, Sophia, please answer your phone. Dad, this must be some kind of mistake. Aunt Patricia, just saw the article. Is our Sophia the Sophia Sullivan?" I muted the chat and pulled up my emails. Hundreds of interview requests from major news outlets, investment opportunities, speaking engagements. But one email caught my eye. From my father's business partner, Albert Chen. "Sophia, I believe we need to discuss potential synergies between Sullivan Investments and your digital art platforms. Your father may have mentioned some concerns, but I assure you we can be quite flexible." I couldn't help but laugh. 3 years ago, I'd approached a firm about a partnership. Albert had personally shown me the door, saying they didn't deal in internet pictures. My intercom buzzed. "Miss Sullivan, your mother is in the lobby. She's quite insistent." I checked a security feed. There was my mother, Alina Sullivan, still perfectly put together in her designer suit, but with an unfamiliar wildness in her eyes as she argued with the security guard. "Let her up," I sighed. It was time to face at least one member of my family. The private elevator opened directly into my penthouse. My mother stepped out, then froze, taking in her surroundings. The vast open space, The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The original Basquiat on the wall that probably cost more than their house. Safia, she breathed, her voice unsteady. What? What is all this? This is my home, Mom. The real one, not the small apartment I keep for family visits. She walked to the window, her heel clicks echoing on the marble floor. How long have you? How did you? 15 years, I said, pouring her a cup of coffee. Since the day Dad said my digital art would never amount to anything. She turned, her face a mixture of confusion and hurt. But you struggled. We saw it. The tiny apartment, the old car, borrowing money for rent. I never borrowed money. I corrected her. I asked you and Dad to invest in my company. There's a difference. And everything else. The apartment, the car, that was all just theater. Theater? Her voice rose. You've been lying to us for 15 years. No, Mom. I just let you see what you wanted to see. You all were so convinced I was failing that you never bothered to look closer. She sank into one of my Italian leather chairs, looking suddenly old. Does anyone else know? In the family? No one. Well, Marcus found out yesterday when the press release went out. I suppose he tried to warn you. She nodded weakly. He called, but your father was sure it was a mistake. Some other Safia Sullivan. I walked to my desk and pulled out a file. Here's something that might interest you. The investment opportunity I tried to present to Dad 3 years ago. If he had invested the $1 million I asked for, his share would be worth roughly $100 million today. Her hands trembled as she took the file. He said you wanted a handout, that you were too proud to admit your art wasn't working out. And you believed him, just like you believed him about my struggling artist life. Tell me, Mom, in 15 years, did any of you ever actually come to one of my shows, check out my work, even Google my name? She couldn't meet my eyes. That's what I thought. I walked to the window, looking down at the city I now partially owned. The annual family reunion is in 2 days. I've made some changes to the arrangements. Changes? I bought out the entire resort where it was supposed to be held. Too public. Instead, everyone will be picked up by my private cars and taken to my jet. We'll be having the reunion on my island. Your island? In the Caribbean. I bought it last year when I closed my first billion-dollar deal. I turned to face her. And Mom? This time, I won't be the one sitting quietly while everyone talks about their successes. This time, I have some things to say. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands. Your father, when he sees all this, he'll finally have to admit that his little girl playing with computer pictures built something bigger than his entire family legacy. I smiled. And that's just the beginning. I walked her to the elevator, but before she could step in, I added one last thing. Oh, and Mom, that Bentley you've been dreaming about, but Dad says is too expensive. I bought 3 last month, just because I could. The elevator doors closed on her shocked face. As soon as she was gone, I called my assistant. Sarah, is everything ready for the reunion? Yes, Miss Sullivan. The island staff is prepared. The documentation packages have been assembled for each family member, showing exactly when they dismissed your investment opportunities and what those shares would be worth today. And the video presentation of your success timeline is ready. Perfect. I picked up my phone and finally replied to the family group chat with a single message. Looking forward to seeing everyone at the reunion. Dress appropriately for a private island. Transportation will be provided. Then I opened my laptop to check the market. The Forbes article had sent my company's stock soaring. Another billion added to my net worth before breakfast. I thought about my father, probably sitting in his office right now, trying to understand how his failing daughter had quietly become one of the richest people in the country. About my sister Olivia, who loved to brag about her 6-figure salary and vacation home in the Hamptons, realizing I could buy her entire life with what I made in interest each day. The reunion was going to be interesting, very interesting indeed. My phone buzzed again. A message from my father. We need to meet. Before the reunion. Family matters should be discussed privately. I typed back. Everything will be discussed at the reunion, Dad. After all, isn't that what family reunions are for? Sharing our successes? Then I called Sarah again. Contact the design team. I want the island's helipad repainted before the reunion. And make sure my name is visible from the air when they land. Already done, Ms. Sullivan. Anything else? I thought about 15 years of condescension, of pity, of being treated like the family failure. Yes, make sure the Forbes article is framed and hanging in every room of the island resort. I want it to be the first thing they see, no matter where they turn. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the window, successful, powerful, and finally ready to show my family exactly who I'd become while they were busy doubting me. The countdown to the reunion had begun. The day of the Sullivan family reunion dawned clear and bright. I stood on the tarmac of my private airfield, watching as 3 Rolls-Royces approached in formation. My family had arrived. The cars stopped, and the doors opened. First came my father, his usual commanding presence diminished somehow. My mother, still looking shaken from our meeting 2 days ago. Marcus, Olivia, and various aunts, uncles, and cousins followed, all wearing expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed resentment. And there, front and center, sat my gleaming private jet, with Sullivan Digital Empire emblazoned on its side in elegant lettering. Welcome, everyone, I said, my voice carrying across the tarmac. I trust the ride was comfortable. Safia, my father stepped forward, trying to regain his authoritative tone. This is unnecessary. We could have had a perfectly good reunion at the resort. I smiled. The resort was too public, Dad. Besides, I think it's time for some real family bonding. On my island. Your island? Olivia muttered, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Of course you have an island. The flight was interesting, to say the least. As my family members settled into the luxurious cabin, their eyes darted everywhere, taking in the opulent details, the solid gold fixtures, the rare art pieces, the vintage champagne being served by an immaculately trained staff. Is that a real Picasso? Aunt Patricia whispered, staring at the artwork mounted on a cabin wall. Yes, I replied casually. I bought it last year, along with a few others. My father cleared his throat. Safia, perhaps we should discuss. We'll discuss everything when we land, Dad. For now, enjoy the flight. The champagne is particularly good. Cost more than your company's quarterly profits. He flinched. Good. 2 hours later, we began our descent. Through the windows, my private island came into view. 300 acres of tropical paradise, with a state-of-the-art resort complex at its center. And there, visible from the air just as I'd planned, was my name in letters large enough to be seen from space. So PHEA, Sullivan. As we landed, I heard Olivia gasp. The helipad was surrounded by displays showing my most successful NFT collections, each with their sale prices prominently displayed. Millions upon millions of dollars in digital art projected onto massive screens. "Welcome to Sullivan Island," I announced as we disembarked. "My own little piece of paradise." "Little?" Marcus choked out. The resort complex sprawled before us, a masterpiece of modern architecture seamlessly blended with natural beauty. "Everyone's rooms have been assigned," I continued. "You'll find some reading material waiting for you. I suggest you review it before dinner." The reading material was carefully curated for each family member. For my father, documentation of every investment opportunity of mine he dismissed, along with current valuations. For Olivia, a comparison of her annual salary versus what I made in interest each day. For Marcus, details of how his firm had lost millions by refusing to work with my company. I gave them an hour to settle in and digest the information. Then I had them summoned to the main dining room. The room was a masterpiece of design, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. A massive table dominated the space, each place setting probably worth more than most people's cars. And on every wall, that Forbes article, beautifully framed. My family filed in slowly, looking shell-shocked. They changed for dinner, but even their expensive clothes looked somehow inadequate in these surroundings. "Please sit," I gestured to the table. "We have a lot to discuss." "Safia," my father began as soon as everyone was seated. "I think I speak for everyone when I say we're surprised." "Surprised?" I laughed softly. "That's an interesting word choice. Not angry that I deceived you, not hurt that I hid my success, just surprised." "We didn't know," my mother said quietly. "You didn't want to know," I corrected her. "Every time I tried to tell you about my work, you changed the subject. Every time I offered investment opportunities, you dismissed them. You were so convinced I was failing that you couldn't see my success, even when it was right in front of you." "But the apartment," Olivia interjected. "The old car. All those times you let me pay for dinner because you thought I couldn't afford it." I finished for her. "Did you enjoy that, Olivia? Playing the successful sister, making sure everyone knew you were helping out poor, struggling Safia?" She had the grace to look ashamed. "Let me show you something," I said, pressing a button. Screens descended from the ceiling, displaying a timeline of my success alongside their dismissive comments over the years. 2008. Digital art isn't real art. Dad, my first collection sells for $50,000. 2010. When are you going to get a real job? Mom, company valuation hits $10 million. 2015. At least I can afford to help my sister out. Olivia, net worth passes $500 million. 2020. We don't invest in internet pictures. Dad's firm, company valuation reaches $1 billion. Every doubt, every dismissal, every condescending comment, I said quietly. I remembered them all. And with each one, I built something bigger. "Why?" My father's voice cracked. "Why hide it?" "Because you needed to learn something. All of you did. Success doesn't look just one way. Innovation doesn't follow your predetermined path. And sometimes, the child you wrote off as a failure might just be the one who succeeds beyond your wildest dreams." I stood up, walking to the window. Do you know what the hardest part was? Not the secrecy. Not pretending to struggle. It was watching you all celebrate mediocrity while dismissing true innovation. "Mediocrity?" Marcus bristled. "Yes, mediocrity. You followed Dad's safe path, Marcus. Got the job he wanted you to get. Made the safe investments. And you, I turned to Olivia. You bragged about your six-figure salary while I was making that much in minutes. That's enough. My father stood up. You've made your point. We were wrong. Is that what you want to hear? No, Dad. What I want is for you to understand. Really understand. This, I gestured to the luxury around us, isn't about money. It's about vision. The vision you couldn't see because you were too busy clinging to the past. I pressed another button, and new images appeared on the screens. My latest project, a revolutionary platform that would transform how digital art was created, bought, and sold. This launches next month, I said. Conservative estimates put its value at $10 billion. I'm showing you this because for once, I want you to see what I'm building before it happens. No more dismissing it. No more doubting. The room fell silent as they absorbed the implications. Finally, my mother spoke. We're proud of you, Sophia. We should have been proud all along. Thank you, Mom. But I didn't do this for your pride. I did it because it was my dream, my vision. And now, I smiled. It's my empire. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Now we have dinner. As a family. But this time, we'll do it my way. No more pretending. No more hiding. And tomorrow, we'll tour the island, and I'll show you exactly what your daughter, sister, and niece has built while you weren't paying attention. I raised my glass. To the truth. Finally. They raised their glasses, looking somewhat dazed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of gourmet food, fine wine, and gradually thawing conversations. My family was beginning to see me. Really see me, for the first time in 15 years. As they retired to their rooms that night, I stayed in the dining room, looking out at the moonlit ocean. My assistant Sarah appeared at my side. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. The big reveal. I thought about the looks on their faces, the shock, the realization, the gradual understanding. Yes, I said, but not for the reasons I expected. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about finally being free to be completely myself. And tomorrow, I smiled. Tomorrow, we show them the future. Their safe, predictable world of traditional investments and conventional success is over. It's time for them to understand that the daughter they wrote off as a dreamer wasn't just dreaming. She was building a new world while they weren't looking. Later that night, I found a note that had been slipped under my door, in my father's handwriting. I was wrong, not just about the business, but about everything. You didn't just succeed. You revolutionized an entire industry. I'm sorry I couldn't see it sooner. Dad. I placed the note in a frame, right next to my first NFT sale receipt for $50,000. A reminder of where I started and how far I'd come. The next morning, as I watched my family gather for breakfast, their attitudes subtly changed. I realized something important. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't in the revealing of success, but in the quiet knowledge that you built something extraordinary while everyone else was busy doubting you. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Sullivan Digital Empire announces revolutionary new platform. The future was calling, and this time, my family would watch it unfold in real time. No more hiding. No more pretending. Just success on my terms.